So, I feel called to do this kind of in the spur of the moment. And I feel called to speak up about this. So, I would say I have a unique perspective on the divine feminine and the rise of the divine feminine and what happens with the divine masculine and divine feminine. I'm sure others might have a perspective similar, but anyway, I'll just get to it. So, in spirituality, a lot of people are into spiritual awakening, the New Age movement, non-duality, and that sort of thing. They seem to often there's a perspective where as the ascension progresses, or the spiritual awakening of Earth, the divine feminine and women have been oppressed and they're coming into their power now, or maybe taking charge now in some sense. And it, in some way, there's like an overlap between, well, feminism in the third wave sense of it, and the essence of identity politics, and, well, spirituality. That it's this, not with everyone, but there's this sort of, well, combination of the two, basically. I don't want to criticize anyone for having a belief system like that and bringing it into spirituality, because it's very difficult when you're going to a spiritual awakening. You've also got ego and you've got values and beliefs and you're passionate about things and you want the world to be a better place, and that's understandable. However, I'll put this in a personal way. Hopefully that will make it more constructive. So a lot of empaths are very sensitive to emotion, more than ordinary people might be. I mean, that's the definition, basically. But everyone in some capacity is sensitive to emotion. Well, obviously, right? Most people, anyway. So with me, I grew up with negative self-beliefs. My parents weren't perfect. You know, it wasn't like you could always point to someone else's upbringing. Okay. Live. Right. Whew. Never mind that. Carrying on. So, I'm not sure if I identify the neck anymore. Anyway. The divine. So, what happened with me is that I developed these negative self-beliefs and the belief that something fundamentally wrong with me. This sort of deep sadness and sort of devastatedness at a certain point early on that never left. A deep grief, shame, something wrong with me, but I've got to fix myself. Then I'll be loved, right? Then I'll be worthy. Then I'll be safe. And this isn't unusual for the human condition, right? But especially sensitive people like empaths can really suffer from this, and we have painful upbringings because we need that. And I'm on the spectrum as well, and I've got ADHD, which these are labels. But anyway, so basically, growing up, I ended up thinking there's something wrong with me. And when people criticized me, it really hurt. Like it hurt me in my gut and the heart. It's like I'm being stabbed. Like it really, people called me hypersensitive. But it really hurt to be criticized, and especially if it's harshly, or I felt misunderstood and judged. And when things hurt me, other people weren't so hurt. And didn't react so much, or so intensely. I was high strung, right? And it's really been difficult, especially being different as well. Any starseed or any old soul will be different, let alone if they've got something like ADHD or Asperger's. So yeah, I really thought there was something wrong with me, but I was trying to fix myself and I was trying to live up to society standards. And the society standards and my parents' standards that I'd internalized. And I'm going to bring in, interesting, identity politics is related here, but deeper than that, in my opinion. There's energy. There's an imbalance in energy on Earth. This is the divine masculine has been wounded. And the divine masculine is to do with taking action. Naturally, it's to do with taking inspired action. But when it becomes unimbalanced, it tends to be more domineering and forceful, or inactive, right? So it's either sort of not bothering to do anything and just giving up and not taking inspired action and just sort of doing nothing and avoiding facing challenges, or lashing out in anger and confusion and pain, or dominating others and controlling others and hustle and pushing and forcing, and I will get things done. And there are clear standards of rules that I must do it, and this is the way it is, and other people must see the way it is the way I see it. And like a sort of ego as we know it on Earth is very much linked to the wounded masculine as opposed to divine masculine. And when it's like that, I think what happened is the feminine kind of got pushed to the side. And I think this is inside of all of us, these energies in all of us, men and women. This has been happening. But men actually got hit harder by this. I think this happened probably, you might say, around the time of Atlantis or the fall of Atlantis or something, but that's by the by. Of course, it led to women being dominated and losing power. It also led to most men being dominated as well. Most men were forced by more powerful men to go to war and to and just be slaves or peasants or whatever. Like, most people were treated terribly as a result of this. And many of the people who were treated terribly ended up treating other people beneath them terribly in a sort of hierarchical system. And it all kind of emerged from the energetic imbalance. And it's no one's fault in particular, because if you grow up in the energetic conditions with people who don't know better, it just sort of happens and it sucks, right? But for me personally, obviously, I grew up thinking there was something fundamentally wrong with me and I was different too. And it just, where does identity politics come into this? Well, when I first heard identity politics, I was at university, and this was before it got big. And, I hung around some people who were in the radical left. I wasn't, they were more kind of at the fringes of my social circle, but I hung around with some of them. And some of them, they're very passionate. This is around 2010 sort of time, I'd say, during my bachelor's. And I was already very sensitive to being criticized, especially by, family. But when I was first told stuff about to protect my privilege, or shown theory about men having privilege. Now, I'm actually trans. I'm trans, and I'm still discovering myself. I haven't grown my hair or anything. Like, I've got makeup on. I'm not sure if you can see right now. I'm still, discovering myself. But at the time, I saw myself as a guy, right? But I didn't live up to the standards of a strong alpha male or something, right? The standards in society. So I was insecure, but I was smart, and I did basically try to sort of compete and debate with people and try to win debates and prove my worthiness through my intelligence and rhetoric, basically. And when I came across socialists and radical left people, I was already, well, my parents were, like conservative. Not like hard conservative. This is the UK where I grew up in, but they were conservative, and their perspective and they voted Thatcher. And my perspective was biased. It was, quite frankly, biased. And I came across these people and I just argued with them. And I wanted to argue with them. I wanted to basically defeat them. And to be honest, a lot of them wanted to do the same thing to me. And a lot of them were men. But not all of them, but I still made friends with them somehow, a lot of them. So it's funny, how it went. But I really did feel attacked by identity politics. It really hurt. Like this idea that by being male or by being white or whatever privileged group or whatever, according to that perspective, that there's something that I'm guilty, that I'm responsible, that I'm part of a group that's done really bad things and was responsible and needs to stop doing those things and needs to be told that certain things you say are bad. You can't make certain jokes, you can't say certain things, and that you're part of something that's oppressive and bad. You're part of that. You're culpable. And you've got to actively try to change yourself to be less culpable. That you've got to change yourself and change and restrict how you express yourself so that you're not a bad person or are less of a bad person. And this is personal interactions or people have been calling me out. And I wasn't going around making racial abuse or anything like that, or I wasn't. I was very tolerant and liberal. In fact, I was libertarian at the time. Sort of live and let live, do what you want, I really thought everyone should be able to do what they want. People shouldn't be restricted. And so I felt so attacked, and it hurt like stabbing in my gut and my chest. And I know what that was. My negative self-beliefs about myself, in being worthless and being useless and being pathetic and being unable to achieve anything. It's something fundamentally wrong with me. Shame, guilt, grief. Grief was a big one. It's basically, I felt like when I was being belittled as a child or abandoned or something, rejected, or feeling that way, when you're a toddler, or a kid, you don't really rationalize it. That's just how you experience these things. I felt that way when I heard the rhetoric of identity politics. And when people were telling me their opinion about it and criticizing me for things I was saying, like disagreeing with the idea that there was oppression in gender oppression or racial oppression. Like I was, I was, you might say, it's compatible with many second wave feminists, maybe. It's this idea of, just liberal, tolerant, and we're liberal now. We should just tolerate each other and all will be good. And many feminists, insofar as that's a real group, because these groups are made up, our categories are made up. It's all made up, right? We're all just reflections of source or something, right? I didn't know that at the time. I was unconscious, right? But it really hurt. It really pressed my buttons. It really hurt. But my defense mechanism was anger. So I felt that hurt. It was triggered by them, but really it was already inside of me. And so I thought, they're hurting me. And even though it was actually from my childhood and stuff, at the time, from my perspective, it was like, they are hurting me. And then it created neural pathways in my mind. And I created an aversion and a conflict sort of pattern where I was like, they keep hurting me. This stuff is an attack on me. And when I saw it getting more and more big and popular, and I'm just going to say it. Look, this is just what my experience was. I'm not going to try to tell you what to believe. I'm sorry if you've been offended by what I've said so far. I'm really sorry. I really am. Okay, because I'm just explaining. This is just what my perspective is and what I've been through, and I'm not trying to convince you necessarily. I really think it's really important that we express what we've been through from our perspective in a personal way, because that illuminates what it's like to experience things from a different angle. And I think that if we can empathize with each other, we can actually heal better, you know? And if we've awakened on at least some level, we have the opportunity to not just react from ego, but we can take a step back and we can actually allow ourselves to not be stuck in dogma. And I've been stuck in dogma. I'm not saying you are in dogma, listen to me. Like, I still hear identity politics stuff and feel attacked and feel the emotion of anger and feel like I'm being stabbed in the chest. And I've tried not to react. And I don't react so much now. And I've tried to just not ignore it completely. But I've concluded I need to speak up. But hopefully I can do it in a constructive way. Hopefully. I know no one right now is listening to this live. I don't think. Other than like angels and stuff. Probably. But yeah, like I was very troubled back then, you know, and it was really hard. And I know that there are many people who believe in identity politics. They have the same emotional experience, but from a different perspective. That it's basically identical. If you believe in like radical feminism and you're spiritual, or even if you're not, you know, it's basically the same experience. You've got all this stuff inside and it's being triggered and you don't realize that. And you're angry because you feel like because they're triggering it, so you think they're causing it. And then that happens a lot and repeatedly to the point where you associate them and what they're doing and what they're saying and their movement with you getting that pain and other people getting that pain. And you think they're a threat not just to you, but society. And you're trying to defeat them because if you don't defeat them, you're fucked. And it's not true. Sorry, that I got a bit. I'm sorry if that was evocative there. What I'm saying is, it feels like you're unsafe if you don't convince everyone who believes it to stop or silence them. I'm not saying one actively wants to do that, although some do. But it's just like, you just want them to shut up, go away, be quiet, and listen and let you tell them how it is, or at least the people you follow online to tell them how it is. Because if you don't, it's like, well, the bad guys win and it's all bad and like oppressive. I'm not like criticizing you because I'm saying like from the perspective of, let's say, conservatives, I wasn't really a conservative, I was libertarian or someone who doesn't like identity politics, feels attacked by identity politics, right? From the perspective of someone like that, what was I saying? From the perspective of someone like that, the thing with doing it live, isn't it? I don't have a written plan. It's painful. And, that was it. It feels like oppression. What does oppression feel like experientially? Being attacked and suppressed. Now, I'm not talking about what is true here. And I know it might be really important to you that a certain perspective is true. And there's all these responses. And it's okay if you're reacting. It's okay that we react to these things. It really is. It's just, we have the opportunity to expand to a higher perspective that's not based in fear and anger, pride, and all that density. We can rise above that. We don't need to ignore it and bypass it. We can accept how we feel, but we don't have to be controlled by that. So yeah, feeling dominated is that you can't say what you want, you can't be who you want, and people who are, let's say, trans, are totally understandably feel that way a lot of the time, especially in, dare I say, the developing world. And I don't want to generalize, I'm just saying where tradition is much more prevalent and prevailing. Where people are a lot less tolerant than in the generally liberal West. Not saying it's perfect here, like, but still, like, it's really, most people feel dominated, or this comes down to, I don't get too theoretical, but a lot of the time people are like, they alternate between feeling they're the victim, feeling like they need to be a hero, a rescuer, or that they are themselves need to go on the attack to make sure they're not a victim, which is kind of like the controller, right? But no matter what your perspective is, you always think you're justified in whatever it is, right? And everyone experiences this on some level, right? So anyway, so I'm going through this awakening, right? I've been going through a number of years. And you start to see things more clearer, but ideology can still have a grasp on you, even if you're trying to not let it have a grasp on you. You hear certain opinions, you're just like incensed. Certain events happen, you're like, how could this happen? How could this happen? What's going on? And so many people from so many perspectives feel like everything's going wrong. There's the climate, there's the social division and clashing, and the division, the conflict. So many things seem like, is it going to be okay? Even if we're spiritual, like, well, maybe what if the dark wins or something like that? Like, it's challenging, and stuff comes up to the surface because with so much energy on the earth coming down to earth, like, it brings stuff up to be seen, right? And that triggers us even more, and it's hard. And it's easy to just be like, well, I've got this belief system from before I was awakened. These events are happening. I'm into spirituality. Let's combine these things and fight the enemy and defeat them while being spiritual. And you can be like, well, divine feminine is rising, and the feminine, women are the divine feminine. And so the women are rising, and they are taking back their power from oppressive men and the patriarchy. And men are being put in their place. The patriarchy is being put in their place. And by putting their place, it's like no longer in charge, but rather an equal level. We're fighting back and defeating the dark, oppressive patriarchy, just as we're overcoming ego. And it's easy to say that, isn't it? It's easy to see it like, well, it's also easy, by the way, and this won't necessarily sound the same, but it's more similar than you think, where we're spiritual and, we're this is even spiritual people who are to spiritual awakening, not necessarily Christians, I'll say. Well, there are people, these spiritual people we believe in, who are speaking out against the conspiracies and the dark agendas. And, there are people speaking up about it, like Trump. No, I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm saying it's the same, but it doesn't look the same if you're stuck in ideology. And I'm not criticizing you for that. It's understandable. And even if you're trying to get out of ideology and not even touch politics with a barge pole, you might still react to things. And that's okay. It's okay. And for a long time, I shamed myself for having argued with people in the past. And I shamed myself for having reactions and being upset. I thought, no, I shouldn't be. I should just be okay with it. And I'm okay with not being okay with it now. Not entirely, but so, there can be another perspective. We were like, well, I think there are these agendas and the people who can control, and they're pushing this identity politics, and it's really bad. And, communities need to fight back against this and blah, blah, blah. I knew these figures like Alex Jones. God. Look, David Icke or something. And you might think they are reprehensible. And that's okay. And I get it. Or you might be watching this, you might think, well, these people pushing identity politics are reprehensible. Maybe you think that. Or maybe you think maybe you think there has to be some focus on tradition, or that we can't just, maybe you think like promiscuousness or something, or like the transgender movement. Maybe you feel like something is, maybe you don't like it. Maybe you think that it's unspiritual. No, I can't avoid pissing someone off by saying these things. And I'm not even saying what I think. I'm not libertarian, you see. I used to be. And I have a soft spot for it. But I also kind of feel like, I don't think there's an ideology that isn't short-sighted. Because I think that by having a doctrine or dogma or a belief system, it blinkers you inherently. And why are we drawn into it? Because of our trauma, because of our things, because of our experiences. And the bias, it's beautiful. There's nothing wrong with any of this. Everything's playing out just as it needs to. But there's this divine plan, right? And all these unique perspectives are part of a path by which we come gradually back to unity. And there's still going to be a variety of perspectives, but we're kind of seeing through illusions. And it's okay that we play through the illusions. But honestly, maybe I could have been a lot more brief with this. And I could have just gone straight to the point and said what I thought. And I don't know when people are going to be seeing this. But, that's okay. I just want to express it. So I'm going to talk about the energy, about what happened here. This is my take. Around the time of the decline of Atlantis, the energies got increasingly unbalanced in the masculine. They were already more focused on the masculine than the Lemurian were, but the masculine got unbalanced. And when the masculine energy gets unbalanced, it's about action. If you look at the occult, the tree of life, now, of course, it's not as simple as I'm going to portray it. I'm sure it's not, because there's depth to it. One pillar is to do with active, and one is passive. Not passive in the sense of like one dominates the other, but receptive. So one is about receiving from the universe, and the other is acting based on inspiration. So the feminine, naturally, the feminine, when both is in balance, the feminine receives from the universe, let's say, flow or whatever. The feminine receives, consciousness is the pillar in the middle, apparently. So feminine receives, and then based on this, after receiving and resting, the masculine is inspired, there's inspiration, and the masculine takes action that's inspired. So the feminine leads, as in the feminine energy within someone, within a being, but without there being separation, because there's no separation between one being and another. But individual is like, it's like there are different cells, they're all connected into a larger organism, but they're still cells, right? But they're just not cancer cells, they're all collaborating, let's say, right? Yeah, so one takes in from the universe, let's say, or from God, source, the feminine receives, masculine is inspired and acts according to what has been received, in rest, in receptivity. And the receptivity, the feminine, is like a satellite dish that takes in signals. And the masculine, in a way, is like it sends out beams of energy, but it also actively moves and takes action, right? So if you look at it elementally, you might symbolically associate fire and air with the masculine and water and earth with the feminine. There's a lot more to it than this, and there's elements all over the place with the occult when I don't know that much about it, to be honest. This is just a low level look at it, just to sort of, anyway. So then what happens is, well, that's generally the format, right? But what happens when the masculine gets unbalanced? Well, you got a bit more ego, of course, but when the masculine is, we get ego, of course, but when the masculine is unbalanced, instead of acting on the feminine, it tries to take charge, and basically you get domineering and forced action that isn't in flow and balance, and maybe the feminine doesn't have enough time to receive properly before the masculine's like, right, we're doing it, come on, let's go, push, go, 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 hustle, hustle, we're doing it, we're doing it, we're doing this, we're doing that. There's aggression, there's pride, there's insecurity, there's shame and guilt, and there's this sense that something's wrong and we're going to fix it and we're going to make it change. There's a rejection of how it is and an active transformation of reality without harmonic acceptance of how it is. Instead of receiving, being inspired and acting, it's non-inspired action that honestly is probably associated with the tree of knowledge. Let's not go too much deep into that, but the tree of life is balanced and angelic. The tree of knowledge is not necessarily angelic, let's just say that, but I won't go into more detail than that. It's unbalanced. When it's unbalanced, the masculine dominates and controls the feminine within someone, right? And that will either be someone they'll act or react explosively and domineeringly, or kind of passively, but like giving up, like not lazy per se, but like addiction. They'll just go to addictions and like unhealthy actions and behaviors, basically, that are not harmonious. So it's when we take action in the world, that's the masculine. The feminine is the basis upon which the action occurs in the first place. And what happens when the feminine is pushed to the side? well, it gets a bit wounded, maybe not as wounded, but it's more what happens with the feminine is it gets sidelined and suppressed. And when that happens, the feminine's trying to serve and please the masculine, and the masculine is either a bully, and often maybe the masculine is trying to serve and please a more domineering masculine energy because it becomes hierarchical rather than equal and harmonious. What happens socially then? Well, you get more hustle culture, you get rules of religion and faith about what you should do and shouldn't do. Rather than being, it's about action and logic, left brain logic. Rather than being in feelings, it's you must do this and that, you mustn't do that and that. Logically, it's systemized, it's structured. This is the way it is. This is the right and wrong. And even science is like, yeah, there's a way it is, and you must act according to it. And if you don't feel like doing it, you need to do it anyway. You make yourself act according to it. Or there's a way you want it to be, and you make it change to become that way. You force reality and yourself to fit expectations of your own or others or both. And you make yourself meet those expectations. And if you don't, you beat yourself up for it and you feel loss and grief. Oh God, I'm not enough. I need to constantly get more to be enough. You're never enough because you constantly need more. There's greed, there's desire, there's insecurity. There's all this imbalance. And there's a lot of suffering. And the more suffering it is, well, someone will project it onto other people because it's too painful to face and they're unconscious in ego. I think this is the basis of ego in a way. And so you also get, what we get is a failure to communicate. That's popped in my head. You get, hopefully I'm not failing to communicate. You also got women being dominated by men and men being dominated by men. All of what we call, if we're feminist, patriarchy, if we're seeing it from identity politics doctrine, all of the beliefs that people have about norms, gender norms, that are limited and structured and restrictive, traditional, and suck. All the detrimental ways of thinking and anything you might associate with patriarchy, the term patriarchy, or something like rape culture, or something like that. The thing is, you can't convince someone to stop when they're unconsciously reacting to unbalanced energy, not just individually, but collectively. And we can't blame anyone for this, for trying to change it, because a lot of the people who are trying to bring change, bringing equality to the genders, are either unconscious and haven't awakened, or they're still going through the process of awakening. That can take years. It can take years, it can take decades, and it's painful, and it's hard to. It's easy to just let ego come in. It's also easy to let divine wounded masculine take over and be like, well, women are being oppressed. We need to make men change. We need to make people change. We need to make it change. And that's wounded masculine. And anyone can act with wounded masculine. Men and women have mostly been doing it, but men have been doing it more because men, as in physically, men have been, I suppose, designed, you might say, by spirit to hold more of that energy, masculine energy, and women more than feminine energy, as a trend. Not inherently, because you can get more feminine men and more masculine women. And what does that really mean? Because I'm talking about the sex, the biology. as we evolve to a new level of consciousness, this duality of sex and gender may well be ending, or at least balancing out and becoming something new and taking a new form. So it's really sad that people are trying to help, but they're going on the attack to do it. And if you don't believe in feminist ideology or doctrine, that's not to say you're against equality, but you don't believe in the belief system. You might be liberal and tolerant. Maybe even if you're conservative, you might generally think that men and women should have equal rights and all that. Right? You might even be a liberal, and very tolerant and left wing, or whatever that even means, but still not feel attacked by that ideology and not like it. It hurts, especially if you're sensitive, especially if you're an empath in spirituality. But generally, it hurts, and that's why people react. That's why people react to any ideology, or any criticism, or any difference of opinion. To be honest, is they feel threatened and attacked. And then when they come across people who are saying these views that aren't even attacking them personally with it, they associate feeling attacked with it. So you might even hear a view that incenses you and you make you feel attacked and hurts your feelings when you just see people online saying that stuff, So everyone's like, there's all these people clashing with each other and arguing with each other, and it's really sad because they're all just acting from trauma and they don't know what's happening. And even if they do know what's happening, they still often find themselves doing it. And I've done that too. Or I've seen someone have a spiritual opinion and I don't like it. I'm like, oh, I'll explain that. I'll explain how it really is. And I know really what's happening, but it's so tempting to just try to explain like what I'm doing now. Oh, Jesus Christ. Hopefully I'm doing something helpful here and constructive. But I know I might be triggering people. And I think you can't avoid that. If you're going to be speaking your truth, sometimes you just got to accept that some people are going to be hurt, potentially. And of course, I don't want that. But hopefully, if anyone's ready to get a clear perspective in any way, or at least to understand what it's like for people who have a different experience, if someone's ready, they're ready, If they're not, they're not. And everything happens for a reason, so... I literally saw synchronicity. I kept seeing it, like, speak up. So it's like, okay. And I got triggered actually today because I saw someone I admired and I followed, and they were talking about patriarchy, and I felt this stabbing feeling inside. I was like, fuck, not you. You're supposed to know better. And of course, they're not supposed to know better. They're supposed to be saying exactly what they're saying because they are, and everything's perfect. And everyone is perfect and supposed to be doing exactly what they're doing all the time. Even sexists. Because there's a divine plan and everything happens for a reason. And God's sorting it out, or source, or what have you. So I think it's all coming to an end. All the oppression and the sexism and the domineering and the hustle culture, the rat race, all this, so many of our problems, and the climate being devastated, so much greed and control and wars and conflict, and basically so much of the suckiness around the world, like so much of what's going on, like the wounded masculine is doing it. And it's not to say, oh yeah, men are doing these things and we women are coming back. Like, it affects everyone. It affects us all. And if we are conscious enough to see it and look within, and also open our hearts to other people, I think that's helpful. I think it is. Because I know that a lot of people who disagree with me, maybe vehemently, who are into spiritual community, they actually have the same experience, but just not overall exactly, but like emotionally. You know, it just, you don't think you're enough. You're trying to do the spiritual work or whatever, like, and heal, and you have healed, but you've still got him wanting to go. Well, apparently we're already awakened already. But there's a process of unfolding, and it can be painful. And so you hear perspectives you don't like, or someone says something, or maybe you've had hard experiences where actually there have been men who have treated you badly, right? Or maybe it's the opposite, or maybe you've treated women badly and you're a man and you feel bad. Like, I don't know. There's all sorts of possibilities, and it's just like, maybe it has something, it's stuff to do with belief systems and what you believe, and there are things that threaten you and challenge you, and you're just like, you just want to feel safe, and you want to feel safe from that, and you don't want to hear it because it just hurts, and you feel like you want to stand up for yourself, or you feel angry that they're hurting you or the people you care about, and you want things to change for the better because you care, and you're loving, and you want a world where everyone could be happy and themselves and free, and you just like, there's so much hate and horrible stuff happening. It's awful, really, what happens. And there's so many homeless people. It's a challenging place to be, Earth, at the moment. It really is. And whatever side you've been on, even though there aren't really sides, you have my sympathies for the pain you've gone through, because I know it's not easy. And well, I've gone quite a while, so I think I'll end it here. Thank you for listening, if you're still listening at the end. No matter when you're listening to this, I mean, if you're still listening to this. Anyway, I wish you well. Bye for now.